The quiet storm inside, the night was quiet, but Sandra Bullock could not sleep. Her heart was heavy, and her thoughts were restless. For days, she had carried a pain that she could not explain to anyone. The pressure of work, the fear of losing herself, and the silence of loneliness were breaking her from the inside. She had tried to smile in front of others, but when she was alone, her tears always betrayed her. The world saw her as strong, confident, and unshakable, but only she knew how weak she felt in those moments when no one was watching. Then came the phone call. It was late, and she did not expect anyone to call at that hour. When she looked at the screen, her eyes widened. It was Keanu Reeves. She hesitated before picking it up, wiping her tears quickly, trying to sound normal. But the calmness in his voice cut through her fragile disguise. He simply said, "I just wanted to check if you are okay." The way he said it, so quiet, so simple, but so full of care, made her chest tighten. She did not know how, but he sensed something was wrong. Sandra tried to say she was fine, but her voice cracked. Silence followed, a silence so heavy that she felt her own breath trembling. Keanu did not rush to fill the silence. He stayed calm, patient, and gentle. His calmness was like a river that did not fight the rocks. It just kept flowing. And in that calmness, Sandra felt something unusual. She felt safe. Her defenses started to fall. She whispered, "I don't know how to handle everything anymore." Her words shook, but once they left her lips, it was like a dam had broken. Keanu listened. He did not interrupt, did not judge, did not try to give her quick answers. He let her voice carry the weight of her pain. And the more he listened, the more she felt her heart opening. She told him about the pressure, the fear of failing, the loneliness that grew even when surrounded by people. She confessed that she sometimes looked in the mirror and did not recognize herself. Her words came with tears, but Keanu stayed still, as if his calmness was a shelter for her storm. After she spoke for a long time, there was another silence. Sandra wiped her eyes and waited for him to say something. His voice finally came, soft but steady. "You don't need to carry it all at once. You are stronger than you believe, and you don't have to face everything alone. Storms come and go, but you are still you. Nothing can take that away." Those words felt simple, but they reached a part of her soul that had been buried under fear. His calmness was not weakness. It was strength. A strength that gave her strength. That night, she cried again, but the tears felt different. They were no longer only tears of pain. They were tears of release. She realized she had been holding her breath for too long, and Keanu's presence, even over a phone call, had given her space to breathe. It was strange how his silence and few words could heal more than all the noise she had heard from others. His calmness was not just a way of being. It was a gift, and it gave her something she had almost lost: hope. But deep inside, she also feared. She feared losing this fragile comfort. She wondered, why had he called her that night? How did he know she needed someone in that exact moment? Was it fate? Or was there something else behind it? Sandra's heart was touched, but her mind could not stop asking questions. And in those questions, a new tension began to grow. Because sometimes, when life sends you the person you need the most, it is never without reason. Sometimes, it is the beginning of a story that will test both hearts in ways they could never imagine. The weight of silence. The next morning, Sandra woke up with swollen eyes. She had fallen asleep with her phone still in her hand, as if she was afraid to let go of that connection. She replayed Keanu's words in her mind again and again. His voice had not just calmed her, it had anchored her in a way she had not felt for years. But with that comfort came unease. She wondered if she had said too much, if she had revealed too many of her weaknesses. She had built her image on strength, on being untouchable in the eyes of the world. Yet last night she had broken down completely. She worried that Keanu might see her differently now. Throughout the day, she kept checking her phone, waiting for a message that did not come. Her heart wanted reassurance, but her mind told her to stay quiet. She told herself, maybe he had only called out of kindness. Maybe it was just a random moment and she should not expect anything more. But the silence pressed heavy on her chest. When the hours turned into evening, Sandra realized that the quiet itself was teaching her something. Keanu's calmness was not about constant presence. It was about depth. He had given her a space to release, and now he was giving her space to heal. Yet inside, she battled with another storm. Memories of her past came rushing back. Years ago, she had trusted someone with her pain, only to be judged and abandoned. That betrayal had built the walls she now carried inside her heart. Last night, she had lowered those walls for Keanu, and now she feared the same story would repeat. She whispered to herself, "What if I lose him too?" But in the middle of that fear, her phone buzzed. It was a message. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Keanu's words were short, almost too simple. "Just wanted you to know, I believe in you." Sandra stared at the screen, her heart beating faster. He had no idea how those 6 words felt like a rope pulling her out of drowning waters. No long speeches, no dramatic lines, only pure honesty. It was then she understood something. His calmness was not silence, it was presence. He did not need to speak much, because the weight of his sincerity was stronger than thousands of empty words. That evening, she decided to meet him. She called and asked if they could talk in person. There was hesitation in her voice, but Keanu agreed without asking questions. When she arrived at the small cafe where they had decided to meet, she saw him sitting quietly by the window. He was not dressed to impress, not trying to show off. He looked ordinary, but his stillness drew every eye. When she walked in, he simply smiled. Not too much, not too little, just enough to make her heart steady. They sat together, and at first, the silence was awkward. Sandra fidgeted with her cup, not knowing how to start. Finally, she whispered, "I was afraid you would think less of me after last night." Keanu looked at her calmly, his eyes holding no judgment. "Everyone breaks sometimes," he said softly. "But breaking does not make you weak. It only means you are human." His words entered her heart like warm sunlight breaking through clouds. For the first time in many years, Sandra laughed through her tears. It was a fragile laugh, the kind that hides pain but also carries hope. Keanu smiled faintly, and in that moment, she felt something shift inside her. She realized he was not trying to fix her. He was simply standing beside her, steady and unshaken. And that gave her strength she thought she had lost. But as the night went on, Sandra noticed something in his eyes. Behind his calmness, there was a shadow. It was subtle, but it was there. She sensed he carried his own storms, storms he never spoke about. Her heart wanted to ask, but her mind stopped her. What if he was hiding pain as deep as hers? What if his calmness was not just strength, but also a shield to protect himself from the world? She left the cafe that night with her heart heavier and lighter at the same time. Lighter because she felt seen. Heavier because she knew there was more to Keanu's silence than he allowed anyone to know. And as she walked alone under the night sky, a thought burned in her chest. She had leaned on his strength, but maybe one day he would need hers too. The cracks in the calm days passed, and Sandra found herself thinking about Keanu more than she expected. His words echoed in her heart like music that did not fade. She felt stronger than before, yet the memory of the shadow in his eyes would not leave her. She remembered that moment in the cafe, the stillness in his gaze and how it carried something unspoken. He had been there for her, but she could not shake the feeling that he was carrying a burden of his own. One evening, when the world outside was painted in fading light, she called him again, He answered with the same calm tone, and his voice brought her peace. But tonight she wanted to see beyond that peace. She hesitated, then asked gently, "Keanu, you listened to me when I broke down, but tell me the truth. Are you carrying something too?" For a long time, there was silence. She thought he would deny it or change the subject, but instead he whispered, "Everyone carries something." The way he said it made her heart ache. It was not a refusal, but it was not an answer either. Sandra pressed a little, her voice softer. "You can tell me you don't have to hold it all inside." But Keanu only said, "Some battles are fought best in silence." She wanted to argue, but she realized this was not about pushing. His calmness was his armor, and he was not ready to lower it. Still, her curiosity and care for him grew stronger. She remembered how he had shown up for her without hesitation, and she felt it was her turn to do the same. She began to notice small details about him, details others might miss. The way his smile never fully reached his eyes. The way he sometimes drifted into thought even in the middle of conversations. And the way he always made sure others were comfortable but never spoke about his own comfort. One night after a charity event they both attended, Sandra found him standing alone in the corner of the hall, away from the crowd. His shoulders looked heavy, though his face stayed calm. She walked up quietly and stood beside him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, she said softly, "You always carry peace for others, but who carries peace for you?" Keanu looked at her, surprised by her words. For the first time, she saw his calmness falter, just for a second. Then he smiled faintly and said, "Maybe peace is not something I wait to receive. Maybe it's something I try to give." His answer touched her, but it also broke her heart. She realized that he was so used to being strong for others that he never allowed himself to lean on anyone. And in that moment, Sandra made a silent promise. She would not just take strength from him, she would give it back. Later that night, when they walked outside under the quiet sky, Keanu finally spoke words that revealed more than he intended. "Life has taken people from me," he said, his voice calm but heavy. "And sometimes I feel that silence is the only way to keep going." Sandra felt her throat tighten. She wanted to ask more, but she also knew that if she pushed too far, he might close his heart again. So instead, she whispered, "Then let me walk with you in that silence. You don't have to be alone in it." Those words made Keanu pause. He looked at her for a long moment, as if measuring the truth in her eyes. Then he gave a small nod, almost unnoticeable. But to Sandra, it was everything. She knew she had touched a part of him no one else had reached in a long time. But with that connection came a new fear. When two hearts share their pain, they become tied in ways deeper than friendship. Sandra wondered if she was ready for what this bond could bring, and if Keanu was ready to let anyone step into the silence he had guarded for so long. That night, as she lay in bed, she felt both peace and unease. Peace, because she knew they were no longer just two people crossing paths. Unease, because she sensed that the road ahead would not be simple. Something about his silence held secrets, and one day those secrets would come to light. And when they did, they would test everything between them. The hidden wounds, the days after their quiet walk felt different for Sandra. She carried Keanu's words with her, turning them over in her mind again and again. "Life has taken people from me." Those words echoed like a bell in her chest. She knew pain lived inside them, but the calmness with which he had spoken only made it heavier. It was as if his strength had been built on top of broken pieces, carefully hidden so no one could see the cracks. Sandra wanted to ask, but she also knew she could not force the truth from him. Instead, she decided to stay close, to let him know he was not alone. She sent him small messages, not demanding, just gentle reminders. "Hope today feels lighter. Thinking of you. Don't forget you are not alone." Keanu never replied with long sentences. His answers were simple, but each carried warmth. "Thank you. You too. means a lot. Those short words told her more than silence ever could. He appreciated her presence, even if he could not yet reveal everything. One evening, after a long day of filming, Sandra found herself exhausted and restless again. She wanted to hear his voice. She called, and after a few rings, he answered. His tone was calm as always, but tonight there was something faintly fragile in it. She hesitated before asking, "Keanu, will you tell me what you meant the other night? About life, taking people from you?" For a moment, she thought he would retreat behind silence again, but instead, she heard him breathe deeply. "I lost my best friend when I was young," he said slowly. "Then later, I lost someone I loved more than my own life. And I also lost a child before I even had the chance to hold them. People see calmness in me, but they don't see the emptiness those losses left behind." Sandra froze, her heart aching with every word. She had never imagined such grief hidden beneath his gentle presence. She whispered, "I'm so sorry." But Keanu stopped her gently. "Don't be sorry. Grief is not a chain, it is a shadow. I learned to walk with it, not against it." His words were calm, but the pain behind them shook her deeply. She felt tears rolling down her cheeks as she listened, not because of her own sadness, but because she could feel his. And in that moment she understood something powerful. His calmness was not the absence of pain. It was the strength to carry pain without letting it poison his soul. Sandra spoke softly. "You gave me strength when I was breaking. Let me give you mine. You don't have to carry those shadows alone." Her voice cracked, but her heart was steady. Keanu stayed silent for a long time, and she thought maybe he would push her away. But finally, he whispered, "You already have." That night, Sandra lay awake, thinking of how different they were, yet how alike their struggles felt. She had feared weakness, while he had embraced it and turned it into calm. She realized his strength did not come from avoiding pain, but from surviving it, and that survival had given him the ability to help others breathe when they were drowning. But Sandra also knew something else now. Grief never stays quiet forever. It waits, it lingers, and sometimes it returns stronger than before. If Keanu's past carried so much loss, then sooner or later it would come back to test him again. And when that moment came, she promised herself she would be there, no matter how heavy the storm became. When shadows return, the bond between Sandra and Keanu grew stronger with every passing day. They spoke often, sometimes about deep things, sometimes about nothing at all. What mattered was not the words, but the presence. Sandra felt lighter than she had in years. She was no longer afraid to show her pain, because Keanu's calmness held it without judgment. And Keanu, though still guarded, began to allow pieces of his heart to show. It was not much, but for a man who carried silence like armor, it was everything. One afternoon, they attended an event together. Cameras flashed, people smiled, the crowd cheered. From the outside, everything looked perfect. But Sandra noticed the way Keanu's face tightened for a second when a reporter mentioned a name. It was the name of someone from his past, someone connected to the love he had lost. He quickly composed himself, smiling politely, answering calmly, but Sandra saw the flicker in his eyes. It was like a shadow had passed across his heart. Later that night, when they were alone, Sandra asked carefully, "Did that name bring back memories?" Keanu paused. His silence spoke louder than any answer. Finally, he whispered, "Some memories never leave. They wait in the corners, and when someone speaks a name, it feels like the wound opens again." His voice was steady, but his hands clenched slightly, betraying the storm inside. Sandra reached for his hand and held it gently. "You don't have to face it alone," she said. Keanu gave her a faint smile, but his eyes carried pain that words could not erase. In the days that followed, the shadows grew heavier. He became quieter than usual, sometimes withdrawing into long silences even when they were together. Sandra tried not to push, but her heart ached watching him carry so much weight. One evening, she found him sitting alone at a park bench, staring at the sky. She sat beside him, waiting for him to speak. After a long time, he finally said, "When you lose people you love, the world never feels the same again. You can laugh, you can smile, but deep inside, there's always an empty chair in your soul." Those words broke her heart. She felt tears rise in her eyes, not because she pitied him, but because she could feel the truth in every word. She whispered, "Maybe the chair is empty, but that doesn't mean you have to sit in front of it alone." Keanu turned to her, his calmness trembling for the first time. "You really mean that?" he asked softly. Sandra nodded, her voice steady. "Yes, I mean it with all my heart." But just as their bond grew deeper, fate tested them again. A message came the next morning. It was about an old friend of Keanu's who had passed away suddenly, someone he had known since his early days, one of the few people left who carried the memories of his past. The news struck him hard. Sandra saw the way his face changed when he read the message. He did not cry. He did not shout. He only grew, more silent. Sandra feared this silence. She knew what it meant. When Keanu's silence grew too deep, it was not calm anymore. It was pain too heavy to put into words. She wanted to comfort him, but he pulled away gently, saying, "I need time." Those words cut her. She wanted to be there for him, but he was closing the door again. That night, Sandra sat alone in her room, fighting tears. She feared that his grief would drive him further away, into the silence where no one could reach him. She whispered to herself, "Please don't shut me out. Please let me stay." What she did not know was that Keanu, sitting alone in his home, was fighting the same battle. Part of him wanted to let her in, to let her be the light in his darkness. But another part of him feared that if he leaned too much on her, she would break too. Just like the people he had lost. His calmness had protected others, but now it was becoming the wall between them. Breaking the walls, the distance between them grew heavier with each passing day. Sandra felt it in every unanswered call, every short reply, every silence that stretched too long. She knew Keanu was hurting, but he was shutting her out, retreating into the quiet world he had built to protect himself. Her heart ached, not because he was silent, but because she could feel the weight he carried alone. One night, after hours of pacing her room, she made a decision. She could not sit back and watch him disappear into his silence. She would not allow his pain to steal him away from her. She grabbed her coat and drove through the quiet streets until she reached his home. She stood outside his door for a long time, her hands trembling, fear whispering in her ear. What if he pushed her away? What if her presence only made things worse? But then she remembered his words to her on that first night. "Storms come and go, but you are still you." She took a deep breath and knocked. The door opened slowly. Keanu stood there, his face calm but his eyes tired, darker than she had ever seen them. He looked at her with quiet surprise, as if he had not expected anyone to come near his grief. "Sandra," he said softly, "why are you here?" She swallowed her fear and whispered, "Because I refuse to let you carry this alone." For a long time, he said nothing. The silence was heavy, but Sandra did not move. Finally, he stepped aside and let her in. His home was quiet, almost too quiet, like it was holding its breath. She looked around and saw the traces of loneliness, the books stacked on tables, the half-finished tea on the counter, the dim lights. That felt more like shadows than comfort. They sat down, and for a while neither spoke. Then Sandra reached across and held his hand. Her voice shook, but her heart was steady. "Keanu, when I was drowning, you called me. You gave me your strength. Now you're the one drowning, and I will not just stand here and watch. I am not leaving, no matter how much silence you throw at me." Her words broke something inside. Him. For the first time since she had known him, his calmness cracked. His eyes filled with tears, though he tried to blink them away. His voice trembled as he whispered, "I don't want you to see me like this. I don't want to pull you into my darkness." Sandra leaned closer, her own tears falling freely now. "Your darkness doesn't scare me. Your silence doesn't push me away. I would rather walk with you in pain than watch you suffer alone." At those words, the walls he had built for years began to crumble. He lowered his head into his hands, and the man who had carried storms with such calm finally allowed himself to break. Sandra held him, not with pity but with love, with the strength of someone who understood what it meant to fall apart. In that moment, she gave him the same shelter he had once given her. Hours passed, and they sat together in the quiet. But this silence was different. It was not the silence of pain, but the silence of two hearts finally sharing the burden. Sandra realized that strength was not about never breaking. It was about breaking and still standing together. Yet even as they found this fragile moment of healing, a new truth began to grow between them. Their bond was no longer just about comfort. It had become something deeper, something that neither of them could deny. But with that depth came a question neither dared to ask. Could they face a future together? Or would the weight of their pasts pull them apart? The light within the silence. The first rays of dawn touched the sky as Sandra and Keanu sat in silence. The night had been heavy, filled with tears and confessions, but it had also been healing. For the first time, Keanu had allowed himself to break. And for the first time, Sandra had felt the strength of carrying someone else's pain. They were no longer two people hiding behind masks. They were simply human, fragile, yet resilient, broken, yet unbroken. In the days that followed, something changed between them. It was not sudden nor dramatic, but it was undeniable. Their conversations carried more honesty, their silences carried more trust. Sandra no longer feared her own weakness because she had learned that vulnerability could be strength. Keanu no longer hid behind his calmness because he knew that letting someone in did not make him weaker. It made him whole. But life, as always, tested them again. Weeks later, a difficult role came to Sandra, one that demanded more from her than she had ever given. The pressure returned, the same pressure that once broke her. She feared falling back into her old darkness. She confessed her worry to Keanu late one night, whispering, "What if I fail? What if I'm not strong enough this time?" Keanu looked at her quietly, then said words that would stay with her forever. "Strength is not about never falling. It's about rising every time you do. And if you fall, I will be right here to lift you." Those words wrapped around her heart like a shield. She realized then that the calmness he carried was not only for himself, it was for those he loved. And now, he was giving that calmness to her as a gift and a promise. On the day of her big performance, Sandra stood backstage, her hands trembling. But instead of fear, she felt steady. In her mind, she heard his voice again, calm and unshaken. When the curtain rose, she walked forward, not just as an actress, but as someone who had faced her storms and found strength in them. And when the performance ended, the applause thundered. But what mattered most was the quiet smile waiting for her in the crowd. Keanu's eyes met hers, and in that look, she found more than applause. She found peace later that night as they walked together. Under the stars, Sandra finally said what her heart had carried all along. "Your calmness gave me strength when I had none. I thought it was something you gave me once, but now I know it's something you've been giving me every day. I don't just need your calmness, Keanu. I want to carry it with you for the rest of my life." Keanu stopped walking. For a long moment, he looked at her, and his silence felt heavier than words. Then, slowly, he smiled. A smile not of calmness, but of release, of acceptance, of love. "And I want to carry yours," he whispered. The stars above seemed brighter that night, as if the universe itself had blessed their bond. They had walked through storms, through silence, through shadows of grief and fear, and now they stood together, not as two broken souls, but as one strength. The world would continue to test them. Life would continue to bring challenges, but they no longer feared them. Because now they knew the truth. Strength was not in never breaking, but in breaking and finding someone who would stand beside you until the pieces fit again.